You're cute. I love it. I love it. You look like that girl from. Hey, I'm Jeffrey.
I'm April.
And welcome back to CEUflix.
Welcome back.
Today's topic is a little bit different than what we normally do.
Yes.
It's a little bit more serious.
Oh.
And it's pretty apropos that I did this one by myself because you weren't there. Because you had to go do a job that you probably could have used some of these tips and tricks that Ron talked about.
Absolutely.
And we're going to talk about vicarious trauma, secondary trauma, self-care. I think that the ITP doesn't really have enough time to teach you how to take care of yourself well.
I wonder if they do in the 4-year.
Maybe in the 4-year. I know that in my 2-year program, they just kind of maybe mentioned it once or twice, but I never really thought it was a real thing.
Right.
You know,
Right.
When I went through the program, I was more of like a robot, and I thought I brought in language and I put it out, and nothing ever really touched me or hurt me. I kind of felt like that Mikey kid from that Life commercial from a long time ago. Give it to Jeffrey, he'll take it. And I felt like I would just take any job. If I was skilled enough to do it, I would take it.
Right.
Not thinking of what kind of mental impact it had on me and how it affected the rest of my life. Mm-hmm. But it was really kind of odd to know that I knew that you were doing a really hard job that day when we were doing this interview with Ron.
Right.
And to think, you really needed to use some of these things going to do that job that you had to do.
Right. And while I was sitting there doing it, I kept thinking, how is this affecting me?
Yeah. Way more than you probably realize.
Right.
And Ron's going to teach you about what your tank should look like and how to fill your tank back up if your tank gets full. If your tank gets empty. About all these little things that just keep adding up. And for years, I thought I was just brushing all these things off and that it was just like water off the duck's back, or this one of my other favorite signs. I thought that nothing ever bothered me and that I was just going about my day. And there was a line there that I had this invisible like line/wall, and all this stuff was happening to these other people.
Nothing was penetrating.
But nothing was coming through, and that was really wrong. I wasn't right at all. And it wasn't until some really horrible thing happened that it all just busted way open, and it's hard to talk about because you want to think that, oh, I'm that strong interpreter. I can go do all these things. Nothing really hurts me. Or nothing gets to me. But to finally admit, I can't do these kinds of jobs anymore.
And I think that just goes to show it's not just a job. That being the interpreter is not a job. It's actually your career. And you become part of it. Mm-hmm. I mean, you become enmeshed with what you see and hear and do every single day.
Yeah. And Ron and I talked a lot about being a human in this job. And some people don't think of you as a human.
Right.
You know, some people do still think of you as that just a conduit or that robot model, and you're just passing stuff along. But this job does require really in-depth human interaction. And I didn't realize that when I graduated. It took years and years for me to really understand what was going on.
I'm curious, off topic of that, when you fill your tank, does that mean that I get a massage? Do we get to schedule massages soon?
Yeah, it does. How about Saturday?
Does that include in self-care? That includes...
That does include self-care and breathing techniques.
Okay.
I'll teach you the breathing techniques while everybody else takes the course.
Okay.
And then we'll practice them. And some yoga.
Oh.
Hot yoga.
Excuse me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Have you not done hot yoga?
No, I've done yoga when I'm hot.
Yeah. Ron does like hot yoga, like in a hot room.
Oh, is that where they have the room like 500 degrees? And...
Yeah, and then you're sweating really bad,
Right.
and you sweat out all those toxins, and you keep doing stuff. Yeah.
Interesting.
I think massage is part of it. Eating good is another part of it.
Okay.
Sleeping good.
Okay.
Running, exercising.
I don't run.
No, but you exercise.
Can I walk?
You can walk.
Okay.
Just
walk
a brisk
fast.
walk. He's also going to teach you some micro things that you can do in case you don't have enough time to go out and do a 20-minute run every day.
Right.
Yeah, he's going to teach you some little micro things you can do to take care of yourself. Because if you don't take care of yourself, you can't do this job.
Correct.
Right? You can maybe do it for a little while, but your tank will just bottom out. And then you're not going to be any good to anybody. A lot of people are worried that maybe I'm the only income earner in the household and I got to keep working. So I have to keep taking these jobs, no matter if I want to take them or not. I feel like I have to.
Okay.
Because I have to provide for the family. But if you don't take care of yourself in between those jobs, you're not going to be able to work at all.
Right.
We also talk about maybe it's the beginning of the week and you know, oh, this Thursday I have a really bad job that's going to come up that's going to require a lot to be in my tank. Ron is going to teach you what to do in between those few days to help keep that tank at their utmost full and to get ready to go into that job the best prepared that you can. He works with a lot of video relay interpreters too. Did you ever try that?
No.
Why didn't you try it?
I don't know why I didn't try it. I just didn't. I wasn't interested.
2 weeks. That might have been a record. That was not.
I like your stick-to-itness.
Yeah, I have good stick. Hey, I've been a freelancer for 21 years. That was a really good stick-to-itiveness.
True.
I just could not do the relay stuff.
So he does counseling, or he's just
so
support?
He's on call 24 hours a day.
Okay.
He doesn't ever say which one it is, but he works for a large VRS provider.
Okay.
And anytime any of the interpreters have any kind of crisis or drama happen, they can give him a call and he can talk to them about what happens.
Do they actually utilize that opportunity?
He said around 50 times a month he gets calls.
Do they call him at 2 in the morning?
Yeah, he says it's all day and all night.
Interesting.
Yeah, all the time.
Wow.
And it's a little bit different from us because you and I know what job we're going to go in to do.
Right.
It might be something might hit the fan when we're in the job.
Right.
But most of the time I know what it's going to be like. But I'm sure the video relay people, just something comes up on the screen and you got to go. And you have no idea what it is. It could be ordering pizza, or it could be our dog died,
right.
or something. You have no idea what's happening.
I'm curious if he talks about how he takes care of himself after taking care of all these people.
He does. He tells you a little bit about that too.
All right.
And we also talked about one of the best things is we as interpreters are really hard on ourselves, right?
Oh,
and
yeah.
so he talks about what it's like for those interpreters, especially on the relay side. You do really great and you never give yourself credit for all the good things that you do and why you don't feel it's okay to give yourself that credit.
Right.
He talks a lot about that and what you can do to try to get around that
Awesome.
negative way of thinking about it. So check out the conversation I had with Ron. Hopefully you pick up a lot of good tips on how to take care of yourself, how to keep your tank really full, how to be the best interpreter that you can be for yourself, for your family, and for your community.
And then we add a little vocabulary that Ron didn't sign.
Of course. Everybody wants the vocab. So enjoy our conversation.
Hello, everyone out there in CEUflix world. Thanks again for watching. We have an epic workshop for you today with the legendary Ron Weinberger. Jeffrey spends a good deal of time talking to Ron. We can't wait for you to learn some really cool techniques related to self-care. Ron brings us a breadth of knowledge and expertise that maybe is a different approach than what we're used to. We really feel that each person taking this course will greatly benefit from Ron's expertise. Ron is an on-call therapist for VRI interpreters. This is revolutionary, I think, in the Midwest. Practically unheard of. Ron, we can't thank you enough for spending time with us today. What an asset you are to our profession. Thank you again for talking to us. Thank you again for sharing your knowledge. I could personally listen to Ron read the phone book. What a voice. We feel confident that you will gain a new perspective after hearing what he has to say. Now go watch the interview and enjoy.
So, Ron, tell us what your name is.
I'm Ron Weinberger.
And what do you do for a living?
I am a psychologist.
And where'd you get your training?
Well, my psychology training,
Sure,
my interpreter training.
Yeah, let's do all of it.
All right, so let me just back us up to how
Sure.
the whole thing started for me. In the early years of my life, I was a drug addict, an alcoholic, and homeless person. Literally lived on the streets, in and out of many psychiatric and jails, psychiatric places.
And where in the country were you?
I was in the Kansas City area at the time. Somewhere in there, I joined the Army. I was a combat medic in the Army. Got injured in that role. I'm a disabled veteran, so I got a medical discharge from the Army and came back and was on the streets for about another year. And then went to my 19th, I think it was my 19th treatment, and got sober. And then shortly after I got out of treatment, a guy that I met in treatment, who was an interpreter, said, hey, called me up and said, would you come help my cousin? And we went out there, and the cousin happened to be deaf. So I'd never met a deaf person before. I could look in his eyes, and I knew how he felt. However, I couldn't communicate with him. So we couldn't write notes. He couldn't lip read me. It was really frustrating. Following day here in Kansas City, I called a bunch of different treatment centers, and nobody either could or would work with him because of the deafness aspect.
Yeah.
So it occurred to me, given my background history, that I was the guy to save the deaf world, right? And so, I set out to do so. And many graceful things happened to me. I got a vocational rehabilitation counselor who happened to be the VR counselor that worked with the deaf population. She was out here in Lee Summit, actually.
Nice.
And so she knew all about deafness and providing service to deaf people, and she suggested that if I was going to save the deaf world, that I should be able to communicate with deaf people.
That might help a little bit.
Yeah, and so I didn't really get that, but she put me in an interpreter training program. So within a few months of being sober, I found myself at Johnson County Community College in their interpreter training program. And when I showed up for that, I didn't know any socially acceptable signs.
I like that caveat,
Yeah, within a week or so, a woman in class said, well, hey, Ron, they need an RA at KSD. I'm like, what? RA, KSD? Well, I was a resident advisor at Kansas School for the Deaf. So newly sober and without knowing any sign language, I figured that job's got my name written all over it.
That's a great job for me.
Yeah. So I just took myself out there and said, here I am, ready to save the deaf world.
And how'd that go at first when you got the KSD?
Oh, I got a lot of funny looks and nods and that kind of thing, but they were desperate for help, so I got the job. First job out of the gate, I was the director of the independent living program. How about that,
nice.
right?
Yeah.
And what that meant was there was no pay attached to the job, but it was room and board. So I moved in the first floor boys dorm and lived with 14 deaf high school seniors. We were all at about the same developmental level. So we learned a lot of stuff from each other. So I eventually got a degree in sign language interpreting. Never wanted to be an interpreter. Too hard for me, you have all my respect. I can't do it. I joined a weekend college at Park College and got a degree in addiction studies. So I have a degree in interpreting and addiction studies. And I moved away to Minneapolis to help open up an inpatient drug and alcohol program for deaf people. Worked up there for about 5 years. And I got a master's degree in counseling psychology up there.
Is that program still open?
That is, to the best of my knowledge, it is open. I haven't had contact with them for some time. I tried to move away from the whole drug and alcohol thing when I moved back to Kansas City in 1995. So from 1990 to 1995, I was in Minnesota. That's sort of where I began to notice the impact, and it's in retrospect, but the impact on the interpreters from working in the drug and alcohol unit. So I applied for a PhD program and got accepted at University of Missouri, Kansas City. And in 95, I came back to Kansas City and started a private practice. Try to move away from the drug and alcohol thing to the extent that anyone can, and just started working with whomever. And in that process, I would work with mixed couples, deaf and hearing, and sometimes do little groups with families and stuff. And so interpreters would come in to help me with communication. And eventually then interpreters started coming to see me as clients. And so not really because I had a specialty in working with interpreters, because there was no such thing. But happenstance, and because they knew me and a friend had seen me or whatever. So by about 1996, about half my caseload were sign language interpreters. Yeah. And I still didn't have all the pieces put together, really. I was taking a kind of conventional approach to working with them. And then I went to New Jersey for a workshop on vicarious or secondary trauma. Workshop there was for myself. But I couldn't help but notice everything they talked about directly related back to the interpreters I was working with in my therapy practice. And so, really, since that time, I've been interested in like the human aspect of interpreting. So I got a PhD, do all the kind of stuff a psychologist that works with deaf people do, but continued my interest in working with interpreters. And maybe about 2005 or 2006, I started hearing about video relay, and in particular about one giant video relay company. And so I reached out to them and let them know that I'd like to be involved in working with them in some capacity, and they said great. And so that was, I've been working with that company as a contract employee for about 12 years now. And what I've done for them over the course of time is provide workshops and trainings on dealing with the human aspect of interpreting. And I also am on call. So for about 10 years, I've been on call 24/7. Anytime a video relay interpreter that works in their system gets impacted by something that they witness on the phone, they can call me and process. And that is now expanded to anytime anything happens that affects them in their life, because interpreters are humans first,
Yeah.
right? And we often forget that, and I think many times interpreters think that when they're in that role of the interpreter, they should somehow be less human.
I think you brought up that before when we talked, that it's a really human job.
It
And
is.
I didn't think about that when I went through the program. They kind of taught me to be a robot.
Right.
And I did a really good job of being that robot for a long time.
Right, because
And
that's what you think you're supposed to do, right?
Exactly,
Yeah.
right. And I thought I didn't have any feelings. Thought I didn't have anything. And when I put my jacket on in the morning, the robot suit would come on, and I would go and do these jobs, and all this terrible stuff would happen in front of me. But I really thought I'm just this robot, and it's not really affecting me.
Right.
But it did.
Right.
And then I realized, to be a really good interpreter, you have to be a good human, and you have to take care of your human body and your human everything. And it's a really intimate human experience to be there with these people, I think.
Absolutely, it is. And one of the remnants of that sort of training is that oftentimes when interpreters have emotional responses to the work, they somehow blame themselves. They think to themselves, so they're already experiencing a trauma and they're sad or they're hurt or whatever. And then in their processing of it, they think to themselves, well, I should have done something different. Or so they accept that responsibility that if they were a better interpreter, if they had more experience, a greater level of certification, that they wouldn't be human. And it's just so untrue, and it makes interpreters then have a hard time processing their emotional reaction because they're caught up in some guilt or shame or irrational self-evaluation about their behavior. So
When you're not supposed to have any of that. You're like the good interpreter, none of that affects you, because
you'd hit your neutral button.
Yes, I hit yes, and I just move this language to this language and this language to this language, and that's all.
Right.
And none of my human emotions play into it. But I really realized here just recently that I'm looking at somebody and I'm looking at another person, and, and it's your life, and something's affecting you.
Right.
And it's a privilege for me to be there in the room with you. At the same time, what's affecting you is affecting me.
Absolutely. Both of you are humans, and you know there's naturally going to be crossover. It's called vicarious or secondary trauma.
Is there a difference between the two of those?
Not really, they're interchangeable. I don't like the terminology secondary trauma as much, because the idea with that is that it was not direct trauma to the individual who experienced it. Sometimes then people minimize the trauma or pain that comes from that kind of experience, because they say, well, it really didn't happen to me.
Yeah.
But in the same way you just talked about being a human and joining with somebody, you know, one of the first things they told me in interpreter training was, you know, it's really important to match affect, right?
Yeah.
To match affect, there's a certain level of empathy that has to be there, right? And then you use yourself as a point of reference for sort of the emotional, your own background and history.
Yeah.
Every part of that is a setup for you to be injured emotionally while you're doing the work.
Yeah.
Then if you're not looking out for that or don't think it should happen or whatever, then you're not able to sort of recover in a way that allows you to be resilient over the course of time and keep doing the work. So I know many, many people that I've met in my career that were awesome interpreters. But let's take the video relay environment, for example. The rate and pace of the work is extreme. The things that you're exposed to are can be the most beautiful things in the world or the most wicked things that life has to offer.
And you have no idea what's getting ready to pop up on the screen when it pops up. And I don't do any of that work, so I tried for 2 weeks. I lasted 2 weeks. It was not a good mission for me.
It's not a good, it's not for everybody, certainly. You have to be able to understand, you know, how to take care of yourself and get your needs met.
Yeah.
So anyway, I forgot what, you know, I trailed off there.
It's okay.
Bring me back.
So when you do work with all those environments in the video relay, you have the big highs and the big lows as well.
So I'm back now.
Okay.
So anyway, what I've seen in the video relay environment is some of the best interpreters I've ever known who were unable to work in that environment largely because they couldn't figure out how to take care of themselves. And so the work of an interpreter, the signing part, which we've done a really good job at as a field, you know, we know how to teach people how to interpret. We're less good at teaching them how to deal with personal trauma, which is, if you do the work of an interpreter, it's inevitable that you're going to experience direct trauma, vicarious trauma. You're going to see things and learn things. The most beautiful thing about sign language interpreting is you become aware of things you were not previously aware of.
Yeah. That's true. And I tell people all the time, I was raised in that tiny little super Christian bubble. We went to church 18 times a week, and nobody smoked, chewed, cussed, drank, or did anything in my household. And I didn't really think anybody else did. And I went all the way through my little interpreter training program and not really exposed to any of that.
Right.
I had a 2-week practicum at Sprint, and all I saw was a corporate environment.
Sure.
And then I started interpreting, and this was back in the 90s. And the second weekend, I got sent to an inpatient psych hospital.
There you go.
And I was like,
right.
I had no idea what was going on. I switched out the one interpreter, and I go, what do I need to do? I don't understand what's going to happen.
Right.
And he just looked at me. He goes, don't let him F with you. And left. And that was it. And I had no idea what to expect. But it opened my world to, oh my gosh, there's all these other people out there that I didn't know anything about.
So it's the blessing and curse of sign language interpreting is that you become aware of things you weren't previously aware of. Some of those things you would never invite it into your life under any circumstances, right? But then you have them, and then you got to figure out how to sort of cope with that.
Yeah. I think they do a good job of the interpreting training program to teach you that deaf people can do anything but hear.
Right.
But I was so naive that I didn't know what that meant. Like I thought,
well, they're human beings, right? They just can't hear.
Yeah, but I thought it only meant the positives. You could be a psychologist. You could, you can do all these things, but it means you can also
be schizophrenic
or beat your kid and smoke crack and
suicidal, self-injurious.
And I had no idea I was going to be exposed to all that part of it too. I thought I was only going to get the sweet little old people that came up to my school to help us.
Right.
That's who I thought I was going to see every day. This guy that worked at the General Motors plant for 40 years and was married for 50 and went bowling on the weekend, and I would go do his little doctor's appointment for his blood pressure check or something. I had no idea I was going to be in a murder trial or all these other things. They didn't prepare you for that.
Right. That's the reality of the work. And so, I'm really trying to do the best I can to make people aware that the key to being successful over the course of time is to take care of yourself. And the way that I talk to people about it is, and I don't know that I can take credit for this paradigm. I've been using it for many years, but I don't know where it really came from. But I talk about this idea that you have a tank. And the tank represents the resources that you have at any given time. Like, have you been sleeping? Have you been eating? Have you been getting your emotional needs met? And a lot of us don't do a good job at that because we don't know how to do it, because it hasn't been something that we, were taught or conditioned to do or whatever. But the thing is, when your tank is full, everything's easier. Not taking feedback from a consumer personally, or being able to tolerate difficult emotional information in a job. Problem is, we are all humans, and so life sucks some resources away, and work sucks resources away, and taking care of our family sucks resources away. So you're constantly in the struggle to take care of yourself because your resources are being pulled away. And the thing that I try to emphasize to people is that as your resources go down, your vulnerability to being affected by whatever bad stuff is out there goes up. And so as an interpreter, any day on any job, even if you think you know what's going on, it can take a turn, right? And so when you take care of yourself and your tank is relatively full, and it's never full, it's somewhere in between, then you can be more resilient and protect yourself better and also recover better afterward. But obviously, if you're working with low energy and low resources, your ability to tolerate whatever it is and then recover from it is impaired.
You're right. Sometimes I feel like it's like this, and I can still kind of go through the job, right? But I go to a job when it's like this, and I think it's just going to be a doctor's appointment, but then I end up having to interpret that you have cancer and that that's it. And then I feel like the tank just bottoms out. And then I'm like a zombie walking to my car, and I don't have anybody to talk to. I can't tell anybody about what happens. And I just sit there.
Well, you can call me.
I can call you. That's true.
And I think you have before.
I have before on several occasions. But it's a terrible feeling.
Well, it is. And you can't always do exactly what you want when you want to, right? So I can recognize that my tank is low and not have the opportunity to do anything about it till after the job. But the problem is, we need to be able to recognize why our tank is low. It represents that we have some needs that are not getting met.
Yeah.
So being able to figure out what those are and do some things to put something back into our tank. So you might have a low tank, so to speak, do a rough job, and then what you want to do is participate in some behaviors going to put something back in your tank. Moving your body around, talking to people, to process things. Paying attention to what you put into your body and that kind of thing so that you're restoring yourself.
When you see somebody or talk to somebody and they do get down to this level, do you tell them sometimes you might need to take a break for a little bit?
I do. I absolutely do.
It's going to hit your paycheck, but you need to take a step back and don't worry about the money, and you need to fix.
See, if you can't work anymore, you can't make any money. Right?
Yep.
And so that's the end result for some people, is that you work for too long a period of time with too few resources. And then it's just like what you say, on the day that you are at a low point with your resources and you're very vulnerable, then you have a job that causes you to experience secondary trauma, which means some aspect of whatever you're involved in is personal to you, based on your own history or history of your family or whatever. And then that's the one that gets people. And then they say, I can't believe I'm having this reaction to this job or to this call, but it's accumulation of things over the course of time. So sometimes I talk to interpreters about being a clothes dryer. So you're a clothes dryer.
Okay. How does that work?
Well, sorry about the body image part of that. So a clothes dryer is doing its work, right? And in the clothes dryer, you got a lint screen. And a lint screen catches a piece of lint, right? And then that's probably some vicarious secondary trauma event from your past that sort of tweaks you, but you're working, you don't have time to register it and process it. And then more lint builds up and more lint builds up, right? Because you're still working, and it's sort of like that old paradigm back in the days of being an automaton or a phone line or whatever. But that's not what happened. When all that stuff's going through there, it's sticking, and then when your clothes dryer at home gets all packed up in the lint screen, what are you supposed to do?
You're supposed to clean it off so it doesn't catch on fire.
Catch on fire, right. So this is you, as you're interpreting, you're doing the best job you can, and you're running that stuff through, doing the work, but it's not all going through. And there are remnants of it left over, and so part of it is being able to recognize that you're being affected, even if you can't completely process it. And then having behaviors, self-care behaviors that are set up to clean out that lint screen intermittently, because a long time before your house catches fire, there's a degenerative process taking place in the dryer. Takes more energy, doesn't do as good a job, right? So that's an analogy, and I stole that from somebody also. I didn't make that up, but I think it works well because it's simple and it lets people know that it's not a benign process.
Is there anything that you say to interpreters to help try to mitigate the amount of lint that's getting stuck on there? Because I found for myself, before I would just take any and every job. Like if I was qualified to do it, I didn't put any other effort in to figure it out. I just did it all.
Who's paying?
My certification says I can do it. I'm available. I'm going to go do it. But now I realize if I do that job, it's going to put a huge piece of lint on my screen, and I don't even want to feel like trying to clean it all off. So I'm just not going to go and do that.
Right. And those are sort of like, I give people advice all the time about being paying attention to themselves and what they need. The idea of taking care of yourself seems selfish, but it's not. And our field is largely filled with women who've been conditioned to take care of other people, in spite of themselves. And so flipping that a little bit so that people take better care of themselves. And what I try to tell people is, next time you're feeling bad, instead of criticizing yourself or beating yourself up, I should have done this or I should have done that, is ask yourself, what do I need? Because that feeling is an indication that you need something, emotional support or exercise or something to eat or whatever the case might be. So it's a matter of learning how to be responsible for yourself. And part of that is being smart about what kind of jobs you accept. And so you might choose to accept a job you know will be difficult if you know you're off the following day. And it's something that you make the choice to do. So choice is a really important aspect of how you experience trauma. And one of the problems with video relay is that there's not a choice involved.
It just pops up. I remember when I was there the 2 weeks, this was a long, long time ago, they still had the return to queue button. And like I could, if I felt like, I'm like, I don't even feel like doing that return to queue. And it would go back. That's why I lasted 2 weeks, because they're like, you can't do that, Jeffrey. And I can't imagine that now. There's none of that. It pops up, and no matter what's on the other side of that screen, you're doing it.
Well, you know, I have to work a lot with interpreters video relay interpreters to help them protect themselves, because many of them are under the impression that they have to interpret anything all the time. And it's just simply not true. The company I work for doesn't have that policy. And I just had a situation a couple weeks ago where there was a young woman interpreting. And it was a phone sex thing. It was a hearing guy in jail calling his girlfriend on the outside for phone sex. And they completed the phone sex, and this interpreter felt like she needed to interpret that, but she had a history of sexual abuse herself. And then it triggered a lot of feelings, as you would expect, and then she blamed herself for having those feelings because she was interpreting and she should have been able to stay in the role of the interpreter. And so part of the problem was her feeling that in the future she might have to interpret another call like that. You know, and so I got involved in talking to her about the idea that when you encounter something like that, you can get rid of that call or transfer that call.
Good.
Because no part of the job of an interpreter requires you to traumatize yourself. But many people think it does, because they feel like they have to interpret whatever, whenever, and it's just simply not true.
And I tell my interpreters that come in to do their internship with me on the freelance side, like, if you get in there and there's something going on and it's not comfortable, you better be calling the office and you tell them you need to get somebody else out here, because it's not me.
I'd much rather work with an interpreter about their guilt for not, quote unquote, being able to do a job than I would the trauma that came from going ahead and doing it.
And I also like what you were saying earlier about going in with that full tank, because if I go in with my tank like this, the people can tell, right? And everybody can tell. And it's such a human job. If I was just a job that required me to add numbers on a calculator all day, it wouldn't matter. I could go in with this small of a tank and probably still do the job. But I feel like I have to always be on, because I have to interact with all these people, and I can't be on with my tank like this, because everybody knows right away. And they'll look at you, what's wrong? And they can tell right away, and then they tell them something's wrong with Jeffrey, and then it all gets around, and everybody
and then
thinks
you turn on yourself for that, right?
And they're like, oh, now my reputation's shot, and because somebody thinks something's wrong with me. But I feel like I have this fake smile when I go in if the tank is really down there. But now I realize I'm not going to work today. If it's like this, I need to get my job to somebody else or something. I need to take a day.
Or if you do, make sure that you have something in place to take care of yourself after you've worked. Right? So some people, you know, single moms and other folks really they feel like they have to work, right? And so, you know, in an extreme case, you never have to work. But, you know, for people who feel like, you know, they need to work and that kind of thing, it's sometimes you really have a low tank, and then you get through the job or the event or whatever, and it's over, and then you forget you had a low tank, so you don't do anything to take care of yourself.
And then you go to the next job.
There you go.
And then it's the whole
which might be a lot less, on the face of it, a lot less stressful, but you've made it more stressful by not taking care of yourself, and then that's a setup to get affected by that.
We talked a little bit earlier, before we started, that if you have a tank it's doing pretty good, but you know, on Thursday, I'm going to have to do this job that's going to do this. What kind of stuff can you do
Well, I'm always talking to people about being proactive. The best way to prevent your response to things being negative and emotionally damaging is by being vulnerable like that. And so, building up your tank when you know you're going to face something that's going to be difficult, either physiologically or psychologically or emotionally. So if I had somebody who had a job on Thursday that they knew was going to really tax them, going to suck a lot of energy out of their tank, then obviously the thing to do would be fill your tank up so that it's there for you to use.
And what works for you, I'm curious, to make your tank go back up?
Oh goodness, that's a good question. Can I practice what I preach? It's very helpful for me, you know, given my background in history. I'm not good at taking care of myself, and now I'm in a position where I really take care of everybody else. And so, being able to do the things that I tell other people are important. And so I have good social support, people that I can talk to when something happens. And when you get traumatized by something and you need social support, it's not necessarily that you need to go to somebody and tell them all the details of what happened when you were traumatized. It's a mistake a lot of people make is when something bad happens, in a video relay environment, for example, then you got to go tell your director, and then you got to tell your director's boss, and then you got to talk to HR. Every time you tell that story over and over again, you're just burning these neural pathways. And so I encourage people, not to have to tell that story over and over and over again. So back to myself. I am a hot yoga enthusiast. And so I found that out 3 or 4 years ago. So 3 or 4 or 5 times a week, I go in and do that as a physiological way to help me cope with the psychological, emotional effects of doing the work. On the days that I do not do hot yoga, I have a couple lovely dogs, and I hit about a 2.5 mile brisk walk with my dogs. So walking is one of the very best things interpreters can do for themselves. When we talk about exercise and how good it is, it's really like medicine. It really is that good. People think, well, shit, that'd be great. Oh,
that's okay.
People think, well, shoot, that would be great. That would be great, except that you must not know about my life because I don't have time. And so a 10-minute walk, so a 20-minute walk 4 times a week will generate new brain cells in your brain, neurogenesis, and just make you feel a lot better. Reduce your chances of getting dementia by about 50%. So just walking is a really good thing to do. So I enjoy those long, brisk walks. And I do a lot of breathing and breathing exercises to intervene on my stress response from moment to moment and day to day. So many things that we encounter in interpreting trip what's called the fight or flight stress response, right? A lot of physiological stuff happens inside your body, and it's being generated from a deep part of your brain. The brain stem comes up, and then sitting right on top of that, you've got, some people call it the reptilian brain, but it's the part of your brain that deals with respiration and body temperature and blood pressure and all that stuff. You got your cerebral cortex on top. And so when you first go into the fight or flight response, you can't use your cerebral cortex to tell the other part of your brain, hey, lower my blood pressure, change my respiration, right? Bring my heart rate down. But your breath will do it.
Okay.
So I'm going to teach you 2 breathing things that you could start to use right now to take better care of yourself.
All right. I'll try.
And so I use these all the time. Like multiple times every day. And one of them is just a big, deep, what they call diaphragmatic breath. So part of that stress response is that if you notice your breath, and that's one of the things I teach people on my webinars is how to find your breath and sort of notice what your breath is doing. Really an essential piece of interpreting, but nobody's really talking about it that much. And so you have rapid, shallow breathing that's high in your chest typically when you're in a stress response. So if you think about interpreting and you don't understand exactly, when you go into that stress response, if you can learn to recognize that you're in a stress response, take a big, deep diaphragmatic breath, it'll intervene. And so what that amounts to is just learning to breathe. Now you take your first breath when you're born and your last one when you die, about 20,000 breaths a day in between. So we have a tendency just to take our breath for granted. But it's maybe, I don't want to say the best tool an interpreter could have to take care of themselves, but it's up there on the list. And so your diaphragm, so you have your lungs here and your tummy down here. And your diaphragm is in between, and it's a flexible muscle. And what happens when you fill your lungs with air, your diaphragm pushes down, your belly distends just a little bit. So in that time of stress, you really need that air in your lungs to push that out into your body with your circulation and all that. So the big, deep diaphragmatic breath kind of resets you. So just put your hand here and then your other hand right over your belly button. With your mouth closed, take a big, deep breath with the intention of pushing it as far down in your lungs as you can. And then let it back out through your nose. And then try it again. So
I could feel it.
Yeah.
That was way different than just the normal everyday breathing.
So I teach a workshop at the company I work for on managing 911 calls. Because video relay interpreters get a lot of 911 calls. And so there's a certain buzzer that goes off to alert someone that they're getting a 911 call, which, boom, there you go. That's all you need for the stress response, right? And so I teach them as soon as they hear that to take that big, deep breath.
Now you're going to make me yawn.
Or any other time that you want to take a big, deep breath. So the other breathing exercise that I use frequently is called 4-4-4 breathing and or box breathing.
I've heard of this one before. I've interpreted this one a lot before.
Well, good, good. I'm glad people are teaching people to do it.
Yeah. It's always weird when you interpret something and then I think, oh, I can't do that myself because that's something I interpret. I never think I'm going to use that back at home. But all right, so let's talk about it. How do you do it?
All right. So anytime you want to become more sane, you can use this breathing exercise.
Okay.
And it's said to, what's the word I want to use? Synchronize this stress center in your brain with your heart.
Okay.
And that's why they call it 4-4-4. And you can work with it to make it 5-5-5, 6-6-6, or whatever. But I'm going to teach it 4-4-4.
Okay.
And so I'm going to tell you what it is, and I'm going to talk you through it a couple times.
Okay.
So you're just going to take a gentle breath through your nose with your mouth closed while I count to 4.
Okay.
And you're going to hold it while I count to 4.
Okay.
And then with your mouth closed, you're gently going to let that breath back out through your nose for a count of 4. And we're going to go through the cycle twice.
Okay. All right. Let's try.
You ready?
Yep.
So gently in, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Out, 2, 3, 4. In, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Out, 2, 3, 4. Now, don't you feel more sane?
Yes, I do.
Right.
That
so when
is
you're
awesome.
switching off, with the team or anytime you have the opportunity, before we started filming, I sat here for a few minutes. Nobody, would know I was doing it.
Yeah.
And just calm my nervous system down.
That helped a lot.
Because we really, don't focus nearly enough on the physiological aspect of interpreting and the impact it has. We're talking sort of psychology and emotion, but the physiological part interacts with that. And so part of keeping your tank full is doing things that help your brain and body recover or compensate for what's, the damage that's being done by doing the work.
I love that.
So there you go.
Nice. I'm going to keep doing that one.
Yeah, I use it maybe like 100 times a day. I've never really tried to count how, but if, traffic this morning was a really heavy rainstorm, and so traffic was really like weird, and a lot of trucks moving around, low visibility. Just start, and I use that breathing for a good part of the drive over here.
Is that one of the micro things that we were talking about before we started too, or is that something completely different?
No, it's absolutely a micro, it's an act of self-kindness. I try to talk a lot with interpreters about self-compassion. Interpreters as a group are the most compassionate group of people I've ever worked with, while simultaneously being the least compassionate group of people I've ever worked with. So you're smiling, so you know what I mean.
I know, but can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so interpreters would pour out compassion toward anybody at all. People they don't know, homeless people on the street. All that, compassionate people. I love being around them for that. That's one of the reasons I love being around interpreters. But when it comes to themselves, they have a really hard time offering themselves any compassion. There's this critical sort of mind that goes along with interpreting that's largely about what I do wrong so I can fix it and then I'll be okay.
Yeah, I think that goes back to one of the examples I always use of being like an accountant. If I was an accountant, I would show up.
What's black and white?
Yeah, we would account and we would both end up probably with the same numbers and we'd leave and go home. But if we both show up to interpret and your interpretation looks completely different than mine, and maybe they like you more than me, and they want you back but they don't want me back anymore.
That's all that mental stuff we do to
what did
ourselves.
I do? I'm terrible.
Something wrong with me.
Yeah. You said a beautiful concept. I loved how you set that up, and I could never set up. My classifiers don't look as good as that. I can't do.
So we're always, sort of comparing ourselves with what we think about ourselves on the inside with what we see on the outside of somebody else, and you're never going to win that.
Yeah, because I don't know what's going on inside of you.
That's exactly right.
Your ASL could be look great, but
well, interpreters get the impression that they're really good mind readers. Because a big part of the job is anticipating and using context and predicting things and all that. And so when they're out of the role of the interpreter, many times they also think they can mind read with their partner at home or their kids. And you know,
it doesn't work.
You've deceived yourself into thinking you're good at something that you're not. You only know what somebody thinks or feels when they tell you.
So I wish I could turn that off, because my brain feels like it's always in interpreting mode. And I do that. I try to predict, all right, what's going to happen next, because I know that's going to help me. And then I can't like watch even like a stand-up comedian sometimes, because my brain is thinking I have to interpret this, and so where's the joke going, what's going to happen? So I try to figure out the joke before it happens, so I'm prepared. So I wish I could just shut that off, so I know exactly the part you mean. So let's talk about what other micro things can we do.
All right, so I teach some yoga postures, and you know, so I talk to people about exercise. And they say, well, I don't have time to exercise. And so I talk to them about brisk walking. You know, get 7 minutes or 10 minutes when you can. You know, if it totals up in a day to 20 minutes, then you're doing the good stuff for yourself. Yoga, and you know, you might not have time to go to a class. Most people don't have that luxury. I do. I am grateful for that. But you can learn a few postures. I usually teach interpreters a standing forward bend, where I use like these chairs would work really good for that. So it's not that you have to do a class or a system or buy anything or need any special equipment. It's just doing little acts of self-kindness that are good for you physiologically when you have the opportunity. So breathing, yoga postures, walking, talking to friends. You know, a lot of times the stress of and I'm going to return again to the video relay environment, you know, the stress of being on the phone for 50 minutes and having a 10-minute break.
That's what drove me away. I'm telling you right there. That's exactly what made me not go back.
It's an obstacle to people taking care of themselves.
Yeah, I bet. I was like, I gotta pee, I gotta do something, and I couldn't. I felt like I was stuck to this chair and I couldn't move. So I know that exactly.
And if it's super stressful, you know, and your tank is low, then you set yourself up. Every time you go into the fight or flight stress response, cortisol comes out in your system. It's an ugly chemical that does damage to your body, especially when there's too much of it in there for too long. But it signals your liver to release glucose or sugar. That's what the body uses in a stress event for energy. So every time you go into the fight or flight response, you get an upward spike in your blood sugar. Whenever there's an upward spike in your blood sugar, there's eventually going to be a downward one. But what happens is over 50 minutes, you might go into the stress response and never fully get out of it. Physiologically.
So we're staying up here.
Well, you're bouncing that blood sugar, and then you get to your 10-minute break, and guess what you crave?
It's junk food.
Yep, sweet fatty foods, processed foods, sugar and fat in particular. And what happens is when you ingest that, you're feeling bad, and it pops your blood sugar level right back up. It's like dope. Really. And so it feels really good. It makes you feel better, only for 6 or 8 minutes into your next 50 minutes when you get the blood sugar drop off right when you need the energy. So paying attention, you know, those micro self-care behaviors come in handy when you only have a 10-minute break. So ingesting some kind of food that involves complex carbohydrates or protein, moving your body around to the extent you can in 10 minutes, maybe doing a yoga posture, maybe doing some additional, what I call intentional breathing, the 4-4-4. It's a form of meditation, really. And so all those things that people can do to better care for yourself. So just about any behavior that you choose to do is either going to remove something from your tank or put something back in it. And so really a lot of it has to do with paying attention to yourself.
That makes sense. Can we talk about ethical decision making for a minute? I know that you maybe not teach or not teach ethics, but I think we need to use ethics to pick a job or to take a job or not take a job so this doesn't happen. Because if this happens, you can't do a good job for anybody. So we need to ethically pick, you know, I know I'm not going to be a good fit for here, right? And this is going to make my tank bottom out. So I can't go and do this job no matter what. I think it comes back to that.
Well, it is an ethical issue. Because if there's anything that impairs your ability to be with the person and do the work, then you're moving into an area where you have to consider, are you the right person?
Yeah.
And if it's psychological and emotional, it's even more important. But it's hard to do because you want to be good.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, you want to be good, and you need the paycheck a lot of the time.
Well, sure.
And if you're in a bigger company, the company's telling you need to do this. And
right.
I struggle a lot with the VRI interpreters, because I see what happens on the freelance side when I come in, especially on the medical side, when they've tried to make people use the VRI instead of having an on-site interpreter.
Right.
And I think, well, the VRI interpreter should have stopped this, shouldn't have even gone on. But
right.
I know now there's a lot of things behind that decision of why they didn't go on. Like couldn't be pressure from your bigger company to make you keep doing stuff, and then that makes you feel even worse, because you're like, I don't want to do this, but the company's kind of pushing me in this way to do it, and I don't really feel like there's a way to get out.
Right.
Okay. So.
Well, that's going to make you feel bad about yourself after it's over, and you did a disservice, potentially.
Yeah.
The problem is a lot of interpreters can feel really bad and do really good work. And so they often deceive themselves into thinking that there's nothing impairing them when there is. They feel like crap, but so a lot of video relay interpreters I work with get comments and compliments from the consumers and all that stuff, while all the time just feeling like crap.
Yep. I know exactly how that is, because if I do some big stage work or something, inevitably people come up, oh, you did such a beautiful job, it's so beautiful. And in the back of my mind, I just think it wasn't.
Well,
I mean, I did okay. Yeah, I know, but then I think you have no idea what I really did, because it was a regular hearing person in the audience.
But who's right, you or them?
Yeah. I don't know, probably the deaf person.
So part of it, the whole thing, I think, the key to being able to make ethical decisions is being able to be rational. And so as your tank goes down, your ability to be rational goes down. So emotion goes up, problem solving and rationality goes down. And so one of the things the breathing does is buy you some time. And then here comes emotions coming down, rational thinking's coming back up, and then you put yourself in a better position to make a judgment, either on the spot or when you're thinking about a job. So the more depleted you are, the less likely you are to have an accurate sense of your capacity, and therefore make a bad decision. So again, it comes back to taking care of yourself.
I've realized that when I do have this big tank going, not just interpreting stuff, but other things that come in, I can handle really well.
Exactly.
I start hearing the brakes squeak on my car, and I really up. I'm like, all right, well, I'll just get a brake job and get it fixed. But when it's down here, I'm like, oh, my car is falling apart. It's terrible. I'm going to have to buy a brand new car. This is awful.
Right.
I can't deal with even the car.
Catastrophize.
Yeah,
things.
That's it. Yeah, I catastrophize. I forgot that word. I catastrophize and make everything.
Yeah, it's all in that. I teach a lot of cognitive behavioral skills to interpreters and humans in my private practice, because emotional identification and regulation is really key to happiness. You probably thought it was money. Yeah, most people do. Being able to identify how you feel and then regulate that. Figure out what you need when you don't feel good. So when you don't feel good, it's backing up to, what am I thinking that's causing me to feel this way?
And you have to deal with that sometimes when it's not fun sometimes. You're thinking, I just want to keep pushing this away and not even deal with it, but you're going to have to deal with it.
Right, it's putting it in your lens screen. Right.
And it's going to catch you all on fire if you don't take care of it.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Take some experience. Sometimes I'm challenged to talk to new interpreters because they don't have sort of the fund of knowledge about interpreting, or sort of the reference that you're going to be exposed to all this different kind of stuff. And so I'm always working on, how can I get the point across to them that they need to be prepared for this aspect of the work. You don't want to freak them out. But at the same time, paint a picture, like you said before, that you're always going to interpret for the old deaf lady or deaf man who, want to give you a big hug and tell you they love you, right?
My little old deaf guy with the suspenders and the little pocket with the book in it, little papers and stuff, and just so happy to see me, and gonna get new glasses today and go on his way, and so excited just because he got to see me today.
And thinking about old deaf people makes me think about a lot of the complaints that I get from interpreters is how they're treated by consumers. And I think when I came into interpreting, if I look back at it, the dynamic between interpreters and deaf people was different.
Yeah.
I believe there's been a disintegration of the Big D deaf culture over the course of time, and the ADA's been around for a long time now.
Yeah.
So the nature of the relationship, a lot of young deaf people take it for granted that when they want to make a phone call,
The interpreter's there.
boom, there's a highly qualified, skilled interpreter, and it's less of a personal thing than that old guy with the thing in his pocket, right? They've been around when there weren't interpreters.
Yeah. Yeah.
When they had to have their kids interpret, and there wasn't access to information. So there's a gratitude there. Gratitude there from them that sometimes doesn't exist with deaf people now.
That makes total sense.
And then obviously interpreters are going to personalize that. So one of the greatest skills you could ever learn as a human being or as an interpreter is nothing is personal. It's not personal. So you never know what kind of bad day the person's had before they, but we experience everything as personal.
Yeah.
Especially in the interpreting thing, right? Because that's your job.
I didn't catch that finger-spelled word, and they had to finger-spell it twice. Oh, man. And then,
so video relay interpreter do 100 calls in a shift.
is that how many they usually do?
Maybe. I'm
like
kind of just making that number up because 100 is an easy number for me to work with. So if they do 100 calls during their shift, it's that one call where they had to ask the person to fingerspell over again. When they're driving home, they're not thinking of the 99 awesome calls that they did and really saying, man, I kicked ass today. They're focused on that one.
Or it's almost like I feel bad if I do feel good about doing a good job because I'm just supposed to do a good job and I'm not supposed to feel any way at all about my job. If there's feel any way at all, so that I didn't do amazing. I can't take nothing. No pride. No.
Belongs to the deaf person.
Yes, exactly. I can't feel happy about how I did. I can't feel great that the communication flowed well. I can't feel great that this person totally understood everything that was going on. I feel guilty if I feel good about it. So that makes a lot of sense. So all I have is to go back to the bad part. Oh, I missed that finger.
And a lot of us learned that when we were kids. We grew up in environments where maybe our parents were trying to cause us to be the best people we could be. So if we came home with 4 A's and a B, no focus on the 4 A's. It's about the B.
That's it.
Right? And then interpreter training is really a lot like that. Right?
And so what do you talk to those interpreters that are in the program now? What do you say to them?
Well, I go out every year, as you do, and talk to the class, Johnson County Community College, whoever else will have me, and I just talk to them about self-care. The idea that, in life, self-care is really nearly the most important thing. And certainly in interpreting. So I try to teach them some micro self-care sorts of things, and I try to teach them how to establish or talk about the value of establishing a strong social network. So social support's like the #1 mediator of vicarious trauma, very helpful for anxiety and depression and burnout and all that kind of stuff. And so trying to teach them to be prepared physiologically and psychologically, and therapy is always a good idea. Because inevitably, whatever it is in your past that you haven't worked out or haven't adequately grieved or identified is going to get triggered.
And do you talk to them about what to look for, what some of the warning signs are?
The emotional reaction, and then self-judgment. There's nothing better in life than a rational self-evaluation. Hardly anything worse than an irrational self-evaluation. And that's the setup for interpreters, is a sort of, especially on their own, in their own head, an irrational sort of judgment about themselves or criticism of themselves.
I think we're always nervous about that, especially from other interpreters.
Sure.
If
not
another
very
interpreter
emotionally safe.
No. Whenever another interpreter comes up and goes, can I give you some feedback? I need them. I'm like, no. But then I know, I'm good, but I know that I probably should listen because it's going to help something I don't want to hear. But it'll
depends on what emotional state you're in. I teach another webinar about how to process after you've been exposed to a traumatic event. And, emotional safety is the key. So at this company, this video relay company I work with, often when they do like a 911 call, for example, they call a team. And so there'd be two people involved with the call, stressful calls, emotional calls, and that kind of thing. And then previously the company had a policy that you needed to debrief with the person who did the call with you. But that's not a good idea. Just because the two of you are in the same call and the two of you are interpreters, is not, there has to be some sense of emotional safety for you to be able to do the work you need to do.
Yeah.
So it could be that the team who came to support you or the team that you're working with in the community is well known to you and a trusted person. That's when you say, yeah, give me the feedback.
Yeah.
Could be that you don't like that person, that you've had bad experiences with them before. They're the least emotionally safe person that could possibly be around you and the last person you ever want to process anything with. No matter if they put pressure on you or not. So we really changed the structure of how people process things after exposure to trauma on the phone.
And how do you tell interpreters to talk about that without breaking confidentiality and without going
people worry way too much about confidentiality, right? We're professionals, we're bound to confidentiality, so we should be able to share information among ourselves like other professions. That's my personal opinion.
Okay.
So as I said before, there's little value in going over the details time and time again. So when you're exposed to some sort of traumatic thing and interpreting, part of it's got to do with the real story and part of it's got to do with the story in your head. Okay. So lots of times you don't get any context. You don't have any closure. So when you describe the part of it that traumatized you, you're making up some stuff.
Yeah, you're making up this part and this part because you don't know.
You're not doing it intentionally, but your brain's trying to work the trauma out, right? So it's filling in some gaps. So every time you tell the story over to make it make sense and to prove the points that you're trying to make, some stuff gets filled in. So fifth time you tell the thing, you've burnt this deep neural pathway for trauma, and you've also distorted the story a lot. So this is key, is that when you're trying to process with somebody about something you experienced, what you want to do is move away from the details as soon as you possibly can into how do you feel.
Okay.
How is that experience making you feel? That's where somebody else can empathize with you, particularly another interpreter, right? And so then you're talking about feelings, and then you can make some progress versus you're back over here talking about the details of what happened.
That makes sense, because a lot of times I hear the eyewitness testimony is like the worst kind of testimony.
It is.
Because
it's not valid.
you think you know what you saw, but you really don't know what you saw.
Exactly.
You made up this something in your brain of what you saw.
Right.
That's true.
And it's almost always worse than
it is
the real.
What really happened.
Right.
Yeah.
But when I first start working with somebody, you meet them where they're at. So I don't try to start confronting, their irrational thoughts when they're in a lot of pain. So talk about having something in your tank. One of the problems with processing is, so you got a low tank, you experience vicarious or secondary trauma, and it just sucks the rest of your tank empty. And this is right when you're trying to figure out how to process or, figure out how you feel or whatever, but you don't have the resources to do it.
Yeah.
So I often, on an initial call after a trauma, encourage an interpreter to take care of themselves a little bit, get something back in their tank, and then we'll dig into the processing and eventual trauma work. But to do it without the resources that you need is another way to really make things worse for yourself.
So to wrap things up today, we're going to talk about keeping your tank full.
Yes.
Keeping your lint trap cleaned off.
Right.
Because it's much easier to continually clean off your lint trap instead of having it huge, and then it takes a lot to scrape it all off. But if you do a little bit every day, breathing, doing the other micro self-care things.
Absolutely.
What else should we leave everybody with today?
Well, I think it's just all about taking care of yourself as a human being and recognizing that you have needs and trying to get those needs met in the most effective way you can. And the next best thing for you is the next best thing for everybody else. And so to kind of change our mindset and give ourselves permission to participate in the self-care it's the bigger half of being an interpreter, in my opinion. So again, we've seen a lot of people that are fabulous interpreters that didn't make it.
Yeah.
Not because they weren't good interpreters, but because they couldn't figure out how to take care of themselves.
Yeah. So you are a person. You're not a robot. Don't try to be a robot. You're a person. Stay the person. Stay engaged with humanity. Stay engaged with Ron or with other people, and take care of your own self.
Absolutely.
Too. It's not just going to always bounce off and go away.
It never does.
That's stuck. It just, no.
Ladies and gentlemen, once again, we bring you vocabulary. We have the pleasure today of having Clark here signing self-care vocabulary for you. Our goal is always to give you more vocabulary than you came with, and hopefully some sign choices that maybe you didn't think about. Thank you again, Clark, for bringing your knowledge and your expertise and taking time out of your busy schedule to improve and increase our vocabulary.
Self-care. Self-care. Trauma. 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 Breathing. Breathing. How full is your tank? Like if you're going to drive across town, you make sure that your tank is all filled up. If you don't have any gas in your car, you're not going to be able to go anywhere at all. Same as your body. Your body requires the same amount of things in your tank that your car does. Make sure that you have good 8 hours of sleep every night. Make sure you don't get 4 or 5 hours and your body starts really going down and will get confused, not enough fuel in your tank. Good water to drink, good food to eat. Make sure you keep up the energy, keep that tank nice and full. So make sure your tank is full. Your environment can cause you to have a tank that's not the best either, and sometimes it can help, in the opposite way, it can help it get better. Maybe exercising, it can help your tank fill up. If you're not exercising enough, it's going to be pretty bad. Depression. There's several different signs for it. With a D here, depression or depression. Sad and depressed. Exercise. Exercise. Make sure that your body is staying in good shape, keeping up good energy level, and exercising. Sleep well. Make sure that you get a good full night's sleep every night, and you wake up with a full energy level and your tank is full in the morning. Hot yoga, doing really good exercises in a warm room. Get all of that stuff out of you and all that sweat burnt out of you. Detoxifying your system, get all those chemicals out. So hot yoga, good. Eat well. So make sure that you're eating foods that give you energy. Eat your good fruits and vegetables every day. Try to stay away from that junk food because it's going to really have a negative effect on your body and make your body get out of whack, make you gain weight, make you sick. So make sure that you follow a good diet and eat a good breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Have a good sleep after you eat your dinner and just knock out for the night. Perfect. So anything last you want to say? Anything? April, here you go. Hi, my name is Clark Congreges. Corganese, I can't even say it. If you ever get in here to town, coming to see me in Kansas City, we have a great time. See you guys later. So you're just going to follow along with me. You ready?
I'm ready.
Breathe in, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Out, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Don't laugh. You have to do it one more time.
Okay.
4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. How was that?
Good.
Did you think it helped?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Ron says sometimes he does that 100 times a day.
He just stops in the middle of whatever he's doing and breathes.
He said he was driving over here today in traffic and it was really rainy and he just did it.
Really?
Yeah. I've used it too.
Have you?
Well, kinda. It's weird because I've seen it, I've interpreted it a lot, and I'm always nervous about, like, should I do this? Like, I learned it from interpreting. Is it okay to use it. Like,
Well, sure. I think ancillary learning is okay.
yeah. So I always practice it when I'm interpreting it. So I practice it too, but I never really thought to do it on my own outside of the job. Does it make
I
sense?
notice when they're doing x-rays or MRIs or whatever, and any kind of test, and they have to hold their breath, ultrasounds, and I find myself holding my breath with them.
I always do it too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially when they're doing x-rays and the chest x-ray.
Right.
And I go, and then I hold it too as I run over behind the little window, and then I hold it and run back, and I go, I do the same thing. Yeah. But I think the breathing techniques really helped. Doing this really helped too when you
Just walk around like
here.
that. Oh,
Not
wow,
walk
I
around
feel
that,
better.
But do this and then breathe in through your nose real big and feel your tummy come out. Take that big cleansing breath. That's one of the small things too that you can help do get that tank back going again. So I want everybody to remember, just like I said in the video, you're a human, you are a human first. We have a very people-centered job. We interact with everybody else all day long. We're not sitting at a desk typing away on something. We're interacting with actual people. Take care of yourself so you can do the best job possible when you do interact with those other people. Don't stand there and act like you have no idea what's going on just because you need to put your brain out of it just to be able to move the language. You have to be completely focused and tuned in the whole time, and you have to be able to take care of yourself to be able to do that job properly.
So what if I am the kind of person that every time there's a funeral, I just cry through the whole thing whether I know them or not? Should I interpret funerals?
I think showing some sort of emotion is okay. You probably should know that that funeral's maybe not the best job for you. And if you're just crying through the whole thing and you
To where you
can't
can't
do your
effectively
and you
do your
can't
job.
do your job, then you're not really doing a good service to anybody, and you probably shouldn't go anymore.
Okay.
Or maybe be picky about which ones you do, or do less of them.
I know I struggle if they're near the age of a family member of mine. I really have to take that into consideration, or if somebody's dad passed away,
Yeah.
I have to think twice to make sure I'm really ready to do that.
Yeah. I think after all these years, both of us have become way more picky at the type of jobs that we do, and we know which one is okay for our mental health, and not just saying yes to everything just because you get paid.
And I notice that I have to be careful because sometimes the recovery time is longer. If
Yeah.
I work all night long, I can't just go home, take a shower, change clothes, and go to my next job like I used to.
Yeah.
I actually need to get some sleep because it's not fair to the next person that I'm interpreting for if I'm not able to bring 100% to the table.
I remember when I was 23 or 24, in the middle of the night, I'd get the phone call, and I was so excited that, oh, look, somebody needs me in the middle of the night, and I'd get up and run, and I'd do some traumatic job all night long, come home, switch clothes, and go back and do, the regular interpreting all day long. And it was something I just did constantly. And
You just didn't process what you saw or what you heard, or
it was almost like it didn't happen. Like all night long, I'd be doing this terrible thing. I'd come home, switch clothes, and just go back and go do an eye doctor appointment. Like nothing ever happened.
And how about now? Do you use any of the self-care techniques that Ron taught you?
I do. I try to sleep good, even though I have insomnia a lot.
We're working on that.
We are. It's getting better. Before I was sleeping like 3 hours a night, but I consistently get 6, 7, sometimes 8 now.
And you feel better?
I do feel better. I eat better now, and I do exercise, and I'm more selective on the type of jobs that I do.
Did he say anything about who you can talk to?
He said him. We also talked about talking to other interpreters
Right.
and what the professional lines look like and how what you think you saw might not have been what really happened.
Oh.
And so to talk more about, hey, something happened and this is how I feel. So talking about your feelings instead of, hey,
The details of what happened.
Not this happened to John Smith and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
So, yeah, I think
Okay.
that's good. That helped me a little bit because I've always just kept my mouth shut and not said anything to anybody else.
Right.
And we talk about things a little bit at home, but I do that all the time. So, but it'd be nice to have somebody else to talk to and not just throw up all my stuff on you as soon as I get home, because that doesn't help. That doesn't help anybody. So big thanks to Ron. I really appreciate his time. He did a great job. I know he's busy working with a lot of interpreters all over the United States, and he took a lot of time out of his day to come and chat with us. So thanks, my friend. I appreciate it.
Sorry I missed you, Ron.
It's okay. She's going to use the techniques now that she should have been using while she was at work.
All right.
Thanks, guys, for tuning in. Talk to you later.